Okay, very good morning. When I was in school, I took a subject called economics. For the first few lessons, I remembered it was all about demand and supply and equilibrium pricing. For the last 25 years or so, in my working career at the Land Transport Authority of Singapore, I found that I've also been dabbling with demand and supply and pricing, except they do not call it economics, they call it road pricing. Now, before I share my experience on road pricing, I think it's important to set the context in which road pricing was applied, and that is why Singapore did it. Now, many of you would know that Singapore is a very small place, but one with a very high population, 5.6 million today, and has been growing since it got its independence in 1965. And that means we have not much space left for many transport facilities. So the key challenges that we had when we look into the future was that how do you deal with the increasing travel demand from increasing population, from intensified development, from different lifestyles and so forth. And because of the land constraints that we have, we knew that we cannot depend on the car as the main mode of transport. It has to be something more efficient, and that has to be in the form of a mass transport system called a public transport, be it a bus or a train. But over time, I think we realized that the rail-based mass rapid transit system has to be the backbone. Now, coupled with a shift in the technologies scene in Singapore, we found that manpower issues for the transport industry was dwindling. We found it harder and harder to get people to drive buses. The government can buy buses, but where do you find the drivers? And therefore, we have decided that the train will have to be the main backbone, as I said earlier. Many of the train systems in Singapore are actually driverless. They don't have drivers. And that's how we will be building train systems in the future. Now, Singapore is also an aging population, and therefore, it's not just about manpower issue, it's also building transport systems that are friendly for the aging population. And so, we know that we have to focus on a good, affordable public transport system. We also realize that we need to have a very good first mile, last mile links to the transport nodes. And that's why I think we have also been looking at making it easier for people to walk, to cycle, as well as to make use of feeder buses. In order to create a space for all these mass rapid transit systems, we have to reduce the demand for private transport. We have to reduce the number of cars driving around. And there's two folds to that. One is on the ownership part of it. You have to reduce the demand for car ownership, and then there's the other part. You have to reduce the demand for usage. And so, as far back as in 1975, we started this journey on reducing travel demand. It was a manual system at the time, in 1975. Technology wasn't that sophisticated, but it was based on a system that has three stages. you identify the driver, and in this particular manual scheme, it is by paper permits that motorists buy from kiosks around the city, from convenience stores, from post offices, etc., and stick it onto their windscreen. The payment part, of course, is done much earlier when they pay for it, when they buy the paper permit. The third part about enforcing, about ensuring compliance, is by enforcement officers stationed at these entry points into the restricted zone. So that was in 1975, and we found that when we wanted to expand the scheme, we have difficulties. And therefore, we started looking at an electronic-based one. And at that time, I think electronic tax was becoming popular, and so we went on to this electronic road pricing scheme that became operational in 1998. When we started, we have something like about 36 pricing locations. Today, we have more than double at about 78 pricing locations. The technology is quite straightforward. Essentially, again, the three-stage: identify, pay, and then ensuring compliance. The vehicles that enters into these pricing locations would have to have an electronic tag, electronic device. And it is through this electronic device that the vehicle is identified uniquely. And payment is done via a smart card that has a stored value in there. And if there's no payment done, the enforcement cameras kicks in and take a picture of your vehicle with the license plates, and then the follow-up process of getting you to pay, including a fine if necessary, follows. Now, the reason why we went onto this electronic road pricing system were for various reasons. One, as I said, it was because we were expanding the zone. We found that the manpower issues was difficult to resolve. Every time we expand the zone, we need to increase manpower for enforcement, for increased sales of paper permits and increased enforcement, which is the second point there. Now, the other thing is, in the paper-based permit system, it was a one price for multiple journeys for the whole day. We found that it was not equitable because there are motorists who goes in and out many times a day, but yet they pay the same price as one who goes in once a day. The electronic road pricing systems allow us to price per trip into the city. And the other thing is, the electronic road pricing systems allow us to vary the charges based on the need. And for us, the need is to control congestion, and that's why we vary the price according to the need to control congestion. So I mentioned today we have 78 gantries, and because we wanted to have a very equitable pricing structure, we gave different onboard electronic devices to different types of vehicles. So much so that larger vehicles like the big lorries, the buses, they have a different device that allow us to charge them a higher rate. And motorcycles are given a different device, which is not only weatherproof, but also allow us to charge them a lower rate because they occupy less space and therefore contribute to lower congestion. Now, I mentioned the intent of the electronic road pricing was to manage congestion. So we have to have a mechanism to monitor the level of congestion and to adjust the price. We use average speeds on our roads as a proxy when we started. And we did studies to correlate the flow rate with speeds. And we found a suitable range of speeds which we think is acceptable to the public and corresponds to our definition of free flow traffic. So for free-flowing roads like our expressways, the desired speed range is between 45 and 65, whereas for other roads it's between 20 and 30. So whenever the speed drops below the lower threshold, we will raise the prices, and if it goes above the upper threshold, we will lower the prices. And I think the rationale for doing this was explained to the public, and the public sees that as being logical and accepts the need for the road pricing structure being what it is. We also attempt to make payments convenient. We started off with just payment from a smart card with stock value inserted into the electronic device. Over time, we allow back-end payment. In other words, it can be deducted from your credit cards, or it can be deducted from your bank account. This was based on requests from some motorists, but it wasn't so popular because I think people are so used to using the stock value smart card that they just continue to do it. Over time, we also found other use for it. The conventional process when you go into a car park is that you collect a paper ticket when you enter, and when you leave, you go to a machine and you pay and validate the ticket, which you then insert on departure to open the drop barrier. Now, with the electronic device in the car, you can do all this automatically without you having to lower down your windscreen or window and so forth. You just drive through, the antenna detects you, records your unique code, opens the gate for you, you enter, and when you leave, the same thing happens, and money is automatically deducted from your stock value smart card. So a lot of people have been commenting that this makes their life so much easier, so much so that when they travel to neighboring countries which doesn't have these systems, they found themselves having to wait at the barrier, hoping for the barrier to open. Then they realize that they must collect the ticket and they have to wind down the window. Now, for the same reason of manpower issues, for the same reason of having more equitable charging, we decided to look at a next generation electronic road pricing system. And the GNSS, or the satellite systems, allow us this opportunity. One of the reasons why we can do it now is because we found that we have to be spending a lot of money to replace the components for our current electronic road pricing system. So instead of just spending all the money to replace it, why not look for an alternative, a more technologically advanced system? The other thing we found that whenever we want to expand the current scheme, we have to build a new gantry, and that costs us something like about $2 billion per gantry. On top of that, we found that we sometimes cannot put the gantry where we wanted it to because of the many utilities that are underground. We have to put it into another location, which is not so optimal. And sometimes we have to put in more than one pricing gantries just because the one location where we preferred is not suitable. The satellite-based system also allows us to refine the pricing structure even more equitably, in the sense that you can price for the distance in which they travel on congested roads. Of course, there's a last point there about the current infrastructure intruding or mar on the streetscapes. That actually comes from our city planners. They don't like the structures because they say it just spoils the whole streetscape. But I don't share the view, of course. Okay, but I think when you decide on a road pricing scheme, you've got to decide what's the end in mind. What do you want out from it? For us in Singapore, it was quite clear. It was to optimize the use of road network. In other words, to manage congestion levels to the extent that most of our roads are free-flowing most of the time. And that is the reason why we went on to this satellite-based system. The other thing is that the satellite-based systems allow us the opportunity to put in many more value-add services, which I'll come to later on. Okay, this is essentially to show how it works. The location of the vehicle is determined by the signals from satellites overhead. And the device will know that it is within a price zone from the coordinates. When it's within the price zone, it will then communicate back to the back-end system and says that I am in a price zone. If there is a stop value card in the device, then the charge will be automatically deducted from the stop value card. If the motorist have opted for a back-end payment, in other words, from his bank account or from the credit card, then the instruction to pay is sent back-end too, and that is then cumulatively collected, and at the end of the day, the amount is deducted from the back-end account. Right. Now, again, we need to ensure compliance because motorists being motorists, they will try not to pay if they can get away with it. Unlike the current system where all the pricing points are fixed at one particular location and where we can put in enforcement cameras, in the future systems, because we are looking at distance-based pricing, it is not possible to have cameras everywhere that you charge. So therefore, we have a series of fixed cameras. We have a number of cameras on mobile vehicles. We have a number of cameras that can be moved around so that motorists will not know where the enforcement points are. And we are going to make it mandatory for motorists to have a working OBU. So these are the three pricing structure that we look at: point charging, cordon charging, which already is possible with the current system, and a distance-based charging. That's the new one. Now, when we announced the start of this ERP2 or satellite-based system, we were very careful to position it so that the motorists are more receptive to it. And I recall my minister at the time, when he announced it, he was positioning it as a technology refresh. And he took pains to say that on the day the satellite-based system comes into use, the charging points will all be the same as today, right? So he left it open to the expansion of the scheme, to the migration to a distance-based pricing to a later date. And this is important because getting public acceptance in any new scheme is really necessary. Okay, so these are the additional ERP capabilities that I talked about. We were also going to include other forms of charging that we today have, but through other systems. For example, at a checkpoint to Malaysia, there's a checkpoint toll. We're going to incorporate that into the device. Parking is, of course, going to be incorporated as well. We have a scheme that you see there called an off-peak car. This is a scheme where owners can buy a car at a lower registration cost, but he's restricted to use it only during off-peak periods, which is normally after the evening peak hour and before the morning peak hour. But there is a clause that allowed him to drive his car during peak hour, but he must pay a high daily charge. And we will be using this system to track and to identify his presence on the road during these peak hours and impose that off-peak charge. Now, the other thing that we want to do with this is traffic information. Because all the devices are actually probes feeding information to us, and we can use this information to decide where are the congested roads, congested spots, and pass this information back to the motorists so that the motorists can decide if they want to use that particular route or use another route. Okay? So this is the softer side of the whole electronic road pricing system. Okay, this slide essentially is from my COPCOM side to make it more colorful, more presentable, and it's all part of this initiative to make it more acceptable for the motoring public. But it's essentially say the same thing as the last one. Okay, so again, this is a list of other applications that we are looking at. This is not comprehensive, neither is this confirmed. These are things that we are looking at together with other agencies, including the private sector. For example, at the top right, you can see something about usage-based insurance. This is something that the insurance industry came to us and suggested this, and we are working with them on whether this is viable or not. Right. The other one is about interfacing this with our traffic lights. Can the information on the whereabouts of heavy stream of traffic be used by the traffic light systems to change its algorithm, to change its timing, so that you get a better coordinated traffic controls? Okay, again, this is something we are excited about, something that we're working on, not confirmed, but it is indeed a possibility. Right, so it's exciting times for us. A lot of work is still going on, so we intend to have this launched by 2020, but we think that the migration will start earlier, end of 2019. And it so happens that in 2019, Singapore is the host city for the ITS World Congress, and it will be an opportunity for us to showcase the satellite-based electronic road pricing system then. And we hope that you will be there to see the development then. Thank you.